So welcome. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules. Our presentation today is called New High School Career Readiness Resources. So what we're going to do today is we'll start off with some brief introductions so you can meet the members of our P2 team. We're going to talk about what's new in terms of our high school resources, where you're able to find them, and then spend a little bit of time talking about the different routes and how you might choose which one is best for your school. We will leave time for questions at the end, but again, if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation, please feel free to pop them right into the chat. So introductions. We're big on relationships at P2, so we always like to start with just a little bit of background on each of us. My name is Megan Ward. I am the implementation specialist here at P2. I started my teaching career in Tampa, Florida. I worked with students in the third, fourth, and fifth grade band. When I was pursuing my master's in literacy through the University of South Florida, I was fortunate enough to be asked to go across the pond and work with educators in Cambridge, England, and was able to mentor teachers and learn about the school system over there. I then returned to the upstate New York area where I am from, and I started as a literacy specialist, moved into an assistant principal role, and then ended up taking over the school as principal. We were a P2 site. We ended up being a Green Shield school my very last year, and I then joined the P2 team. I live in upstate New York with my fiance, Alex. Going to pass the microphone along to Steph to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I was born in Kansas City, Kansas, one of five girls. I went to California for my undergrad, where I got my elementary ed and soon secondary degree. From there, I did my student teaching abroad in Italy in an international school. I got my first job teaching in Texas for a few years. From there, I moved back to Kansas to get my master's in educational psychology. Then I moved to North Carolina, where I taught in a middle school for a few years. And then my family and we moved to Michigan. This is when I started my P2 journey. I had our first daughter, then we moved to South Carolina, had our second daughter, still with P2, and now we live in Georgia, where our third daughter was born, still with P2. So,
Thank you, Stephanie. And Ingram, I'm going to pass the mic to you.
I am Ingram Milam. I was a classroom teacher for 11 years, mostly English language arts in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas. I have now moved from college tour field trips, as you can see, at the University of North Carolina, and student book clubs to P2 curriculum writing and toddler field trips to the public library in our town. And even though I am no longer in the classroom, I think it's important to note that when we are working with these resources, we are constantly asking ourselves, what would this look like in our classroom? How would this be used with our students? So bringing that very teacher-centric perspective into these resources is something that we just naturally do and try to keep in mind with any resource that we create.
All right, so we are going to begin to move into what's new, the why behind the changes. What you're going to see in the next set of slides is both Steph and Ingram walking through some of our new P2 resources and new potential models. So when you think of our typical P2 calendar, that still exists for pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. We've received a lot of feedback. Again, our team will talk about that today, and they have created different new resources. We have a P2 Career Readiness Toolbox. We have a new high school calendar, and then we have a P2 portrait of a graduate. And these different resources are really designed to give you options when you think about what might work best within your given space. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to the curriculum team to be able to share a little bit about each of these resources. And then at the end, we'll talk about the different routes and perhaps different elements you might want to consider when selecting what would work best for your site.
so the way we're going to work this out is we're going to talk about some of our P2 partner schools that we have and some of the feedback that they have given us, and maybe some of the challenges they've faced in their own schedules and things. And then, so what we'll do is we'll take a school and then I will tell you how we've responded with which resource and what that looks like. And we'll just keep kind of going back and forth. So the first model is a classroom model, and a school that we work with up in New York, Holland Patton High School. Their teachers, They didn't find space for P2 in every single classroom for every single day. So what they did is they created a ninth grade seminar class where one teacher gets all of the ninth graders and she teaches P2. She's created almost her own version of a P2 elective using our daily slide decks. But what she found was that the teachers in the school loved her class and they said, our students need this stuff. We just can't fit this into our schedule. So we want you to kind of like lead the charge and teach them these things. So what she did was she surveyed her teachers and asked, what is it that you're finding our students can't do or don't know how to do? And what they came back with is a bunch of these soft skills. So things like emailing, looking people in the eye, shaking hands appropriately, all of these soft skills that maybe we take advantage of or we don't realize that we had them or someone taught us that along the way. And there's that missing piece. So what we responded with is this, Megan, will you go to, thank you, is this P2 Career Readiness Toolbox. So what we've done is we've taken these soft skills and we've broken them down. So on the next slide, you will see kind of a zoomed in version of this, and you'll see that we have umbrella categories. So for instance, communication is 1 week's topic, a soft skill topic, and that goes with being present and giving others my attention. And so in ninth grade, they're going to work on listening. In 10th grade, it's eye contact. 11th grade is formal emails, and 12th grade is phone etiquette. So you can see how all of those are a part of communication, but every grade level is going to build on what communication looks like, not just now, but in their future. Really, we want to focus on, yes, they need these skills now. Like, obviously, we'd all love for our students to be able to email us appropriately, but not only will this help them here in high school, but this is setting them up for the future. So in the week of forgiveness, it's conflict resolution. Well, what does that look like in the workplace? How do you resolve conflict with your coworkers? How do you use self-reflection in your conflicts? How are you going to use practice perspective and matching conversations? So on the next slide, we're going to dig in deeper to what one of these weeks looks like for each grade level. So one of the weeks is interview prep. So you'll see here in ninth grade, what we focus on in interview prep is first impressions, is helping students recognize that your interview doesn't start the moment you walk into the interview room. It starts the moment you walk into the building. So you need to consider how you're interacting with every single person in that building. Are you making eye contact? Are you smiling? When you're sitting in the waiting room, are you sitting up straight and not being, lazy or whatever that might look like to someone else? And then in 10th grade, so now in ninth grade, they had this idea of, oh, wow, I have to think about what I'm doing the moment I step through the door. Well, that also includes, what are you going to wear? So in 10th grade, we talk about appropriate dress, and also considering, what are you interviewing for? What you're going to wear to an interview for a barista position might be very different than what you wear for an accounting position. So this activity has students look at different examples of clothing, and they get to decide, is this appropriate for this job that they're interviewing for? Is this not appropriate? And then it really encourages them to discuss, well, why is this appropriate? What is the perspective of other people, and how does that matter in the workplace? How do you understand that the way you present yourself is going to affect your future career and the opportunities you have? So then in 11th grade, we actually get into this idea, okay, now you're in the interview room, and the question we all love, tell us a little bit about yourself. Well, what does that look like? What are they actually asking you? How do you respond in an appropriate way for an interview question? Because chances are they're not asking you where you were born and how many siblings you have. They're looking for something else. These employers, it's a very pointed question, and there's a very appropriate way to answer that. So we cover that in 11th grade. And then in 12th grade, we move on to, okay, the interview's over. How do you make yourself stand out? You follow up with a thank you email, and we talk about the difference between, in a lot of our days, it was a thank you written note, but nowadays you don't know if that employer is getting on a plane after your interview, and you need to get that email in their inbox within 24 hours. So not only what is the purpose of a thank you email, but how do you do it? What's included? What's written in it? So this is an example of how we've broken down one umbrella category of interview prep and how it builds from 9th grade through 12th grade. So the hope is that a 9th grader will get all of these so that by the end of their high school career, they will be, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. I can get into that interview and I can impress the people that are there. And then along with the Career Readiness Toolbox, you will see at the very bottom, we have a series of interview questions. We believe it's important for students to not only think about like, what am I going to wear, but also like, how do I answer interview questions appropriately? So what we've done is we've found these behavioral-based interview questions that are used in many real-world situations, and we have used the same question for every grade level. And we did that on purpose because, again, we want them to build. So, for instance, the week of curiosity, the question is describe a situation where you identified a knowledge gap in yourself and took initiative to learn something new to address it. So in ninth grade, they're just going to reflect and write about it. They just have to really kind of like get their mind around, well, how would I answer this? And what would an employer be looking for? In 10th grade, they're going to be working with a partner. You know, it's kind of low stakes. I interview you, you interview me, but we're getting our feet underneath us. In 11th grade, they're going to start practicing this panel interview. You know, it's very different looking at one set of eyes versus 5 set of eyes when someone asks you the question. And then in 12th grade, we're kind of putting them not only in the interviewee spot, but also the interviewer spot. We all know if you're in a position long enough, you get pulled onto that panel eventually to be one of the interviewers. So in 12th grade, you're practicing answering the question, but then the panel is also practicing listening to that question and following up with appropriate questions to get more out of the interviewee. And what does that look like? What would be beneficial for an employer to ask and to hear more about? So that's our career readiness toolbox and what you will find there. And then our next school, oh, one thing I do want to say. So that was our classroom model. Sorry, just real quick, going back to that. So the way we imagine this being used is perhaps in a classroom specifically, just like our Holland Patton classroom. This could be something that she incorporates within her classroom with what she's already doing. But also we know that there are CTE courses or there are business courses where these would be really great off-the-shelf resources to teach what you feel like we've got the content knowledge. Now we need to kind of umph some of these soft skills, and I can use this. They're all set up to be about 10 minutes. And so if you're a business teacher, you can use this and pick and choose. You can cherry pick what you want or what you see your students need. But also you don't have to be a business teacher. If you are just an English teacher and you feel like my students need to work on formal emails, I'm going to pull that for one of my lessons one day. So sorry, I missed that. That's how we see it kind of being used in a classroom model. So then this next one is the whole school model. We have a school down in Florida, the Imagine School in Northport. And what we have heard from them was that their whole district follows the calendar and they love following the calendar. But what they found was that there wasn't a high school lens on the calendar. They were having to pull and they were creating their own, some of these soft skills lessons, things that they felt were missing in their students. And so they would go through the P2 lesson and then they would they would add on more that the teachers were having to create themselves. And so what we did is we've created this P2 high school calendar. So now we've put this high school lens on it. What we've done is we have associated each of our character strengths and our OPMs with a portrait of a graduate attribute. It is this idea that what we believe in P2 is that P2 is not something separate. It's part of what you're already doing with your students. You're already teaching them exploratory thinking. You're already trying to get them to use critical thinking skills. And so it's P2, when you're teaching critical thinking, is also very much open-mindedness. They're two in the same thing. So instead of separating it and having P2 be its own separate thing, like another thing we have to do, a character ed program that is separated, instead it's like, no, this is already what you're teaching, but it's just forming a different side of the student. You know, you are forming in your classroom perhaps that analytical side, but P2 helps kind of shape that human side to them. So this gives that high school calendar more of that high school lens that we believed Imagine School Northport was looking for. So on the next slide, this is what you will find in this new high school deck. So we have heard everyone for some time say 10, 15 minutes every single day in high school just doesn't work. We just don't have the time. Your schedules are different and demanding, and we know pacing in classrooms is hard. And so what we are trying to do is to solve that problem with this. What we have created is we've pulled from those decks, those daily slide decks we've had. You're going to see the same thing if you've interacted with them in the past. You're going to see the same similar videos. You're going to see the same activities. Really what's new is just the layout of it and these career readiness activities. So the bones of the deck start with a discussion. This is that video and the questions that go along with it. This is having students see what the character strength looks like in real life and talking about it. And then the activity is engaging with that character strength again. So just like our daily slide decks are understand, engage, reflect, we have understand, which is the discussion, engage, which is the activity, and instead of reflect is that career readiness, where we're bridging those two things. So now when they're talking about perspective and discussion and the activity, they're recognizing perspective through the lens of professionalism. Well, what does perspective look like when it comes to professionalism? Recognizing that other people's perception of you is going to affect your career, whether you like it or not. So how do I use that knowledge and make the best of my, how do I present myself the best to those in my future career? So those are the bones of each slide deck. Here's an example of a slide deck. And we have a couple different options here. We have one that's 30 minutes where it just all of this is put in there for you. Boom, boom, boom. So if you have an advisory period once a week that you can commit 30 minutes, you could start with a discussion, move into the activity, and move into the career readiness. This is an example of perspective where they've watched a video, questions, then they do a specific activity to perspective. And then, like I said before, perspective is professionalism. So the discussion for this grade is they're talking about punctuality and how you being on time sends a message to those people around you. They have a perspective on you, again, whether you like it or not. So the importance of showing up on time and the respect aspect of that is something we discuss in this career readiness activity. So then, what we've done is we've taken that 30-minute deck. If you have 30 minutes, great, boom, there it is for you. If you don't have 30 minutes through once a week, you can do, we've taken that 30-minute deck and we've broken it into 10-minute separate decks, 3 times, one discussion, 10-minute, one activity, 10-minute, one career readiness activity for 10 minutes. So this is really where you can kind of wiggle and use it the way you want to use it. So if your school only has 10 minutes in a week, you either as a school or as a teacher can decide, you know what, my students love videos and they'll love the questions. We're going to do the discussion this week. Or you look at the career readiness and it's like, yeah, my kids could really work on listening this week. We're going to do career readiness. If you have 20 minutes, maybe once on a Monday and once on a Thursday, you could do the activity and the career readiness activity. It's meant for you to use it the way you want to use it, the way your students like to use it. We find that a lot of the feedback is like the engagement is low, whether that's like, we have some schools say like, oh, our kids love the videos, and other schools say, yeah, our kids don't love the videos. Like whatever your kids love or whatever you believe as the teacher, you believe your students need, use this in the way that works for you. And that's why we've separated it into those 10-minute blocks so that you can wiggle the way you want to wiggle. Our next, yep, we're good. Our next one is the selective strengths model. So this is a high school up in Michigan, Pinckney High School. And a few years ago, their whole district adopted P2. And the 10 to 15 minutes a day, like we hear regularly, worked really well in elementary. It worked well in the middle school, and the high school could not commit to that time period. So what they did is their leadership class took our calendar, took our strengths, and they picked a strength per month. They felt like this is something that we can do. This is feasible for us. Doing a new one every week is just not feasible for us. So we're going to pick one once a month. And the leadership class at the time was choosing which videos to watch, which activities to watch, and they would do one per month. And it usually had to do with what was going on that month. So, maybe the first month of school was curiosity because that was something they wanted to lean into. And then around the holidays, it was kindness. And then around, Valentine's Day, it was love. And so that's how they selected their strengths, was more what they wanted around that time of the year. How we responded with that is we've created this P2 portrait of a graduate. We know a lot of schools, high schools, have portrait of a graduate for their states. And what we've done is we've created, based on the states' portrait of a graduate attributes or categories, we've created a P2 one to mirror those. So you'll see here our categories are learner, critical thinker, communicator, collaborator, citizen, and leader. So again, like I said before with the calendar, we believe that P2 is not another thing. It's just a piece of the puzzle. To develop the students completely, you need to look at every part of the student. So a way a school could use this, and this would work really well with schools who students have had P2 for maybe in elementary or in middle school, and they understand what the strengths are. So they don't necessarily need to go over the strengths every single month. So what they could do if a school wanted to is perhaps you spend a whole year working on learner strengths and you just focus this year on being a learner, or you pick one from each category. So this month we're going to do a learner. Next month we're going to do critical thinker. The next month communicator. Or you look at this list and you say, you know what? Our students really could benefit from appreciative mindset. We're going to just do gratitude because that's something we want to work on this year, or we want to work on initiative this year. And the categories don't matter to you as much. It's more just what your students need. But this is here for you to play with, for it to fit what your goals are as a school, like what you want to see from your graduates. And potentially, if a school were to do a few every year, the hope is that from ninth grade up until the 12th grade, they will have covered all of them. So every student that starts in ninth grade would get the whole picture by the time they're in 12th grade. And on the next slide, you'll see what happens when you click on one of these. So you will get this weekly high school toolbox. And this is what I was explaining before. You'll see at the top, there's that weekly 30-minute lesson. And then you see it's broken down in those 10-minute chunks, the video and discussion, activity lesson, and the career readiness lesson. So how I could see a school using this is if you're doing it one strength per month, you might do the video and discussion one Friday, and then you might do the activity lesson another Friday, and then you might do the career readiness lesson another Friday. And then that leaves you an extra day or extra time because you're only using 10 minutes of that advisory. And I think this could be a beautiful way to really lean in to student-directed activities. Pinckney, who does this, one of the things that their school loves the most is their leadership class creates these videos where they go around and they interview students in the lunchroom or in the hallway to explain what the strength is of that week. And then they will release that video the next week. So this is another opportunity for students to kind of lean into those student directed because you're not so forced to get through everything. If you're talking about kindness the whole month of December, then you get to lean in the whole month of December talking about kindness. And then that gives you wiggle room as things come up, whether that's homecoming pep assemblies or it's fire drills, or you don't lose the momentum because you have the whole month to talk about it. And then it also lends itself for teachers in their regular curriculum classes to also talk about it because they know, oh, I know how to bring kindness into the novel we're reading. And I don't have to think about something new every week. All I'm thinking about for this month is that strength we're talking about for this month. So that's a beautiful way to use this. Now, if your younger students have never had P2, you can still go this route too. I don't want to preclude anyone and say like this is only for students who've had P2 in the past. this is just another great way for high schools to use this. So as you can see, these are all 3 different iterations of the same materials. They're just packaged in different ways. And we're hoping that in sharing some of these high schools experiences, you might hear some of your own experiences, and that will help guide you perhaps towards which resource is best for you. But these are our new high school resources, and I'm going to pass it on to Ingram to tell you where you can find these.
So we have tried to make these as easily accessible as possible. So the first place that you can find them is on the P2 website in the resource menu. Since they are a brand new resource, they are on the first page of the menu or the resource table where you pull that up. If and when they move, you can either click on the drop-down menu and find high school career readiness resources, or you can search in the search bar for high school career readiness resources, and you will find those 3 resources linked. The next place that you can find them is my personal favorite, is the P2 resource guide. So I have this guide bookmarked, and I can just click open one document and everything is here on one page or 2 pages in one place. So they are listed at the bottom of the first page under high school career readiness resources. We have linked them separately, so you can click on the link and go directly to the calendar, directly to Portrait of a Graduate, or directly to the career readiness activities. And then the last place that you can find them is if you are used to using the traditional calendar and the weekly toolboxes that are linked each week. These are linked under high school career readiness resources in each of the weekly toolboxes, toolkits. So here's intro week. We have added it under the regular slides. And again, we have linked them separately so you can easily click and go directly to whichever route that you have chosen.
So we're going to talk a little bit about which route. Which route is best for your particular site and just some factors to kind of consider. So I want to make it known, and the team has alluded to this, the P2 calendar is still available. If you're a site and it's working well, where you have the time to dedicate and you're able to work through the day 1 through 5 lessons or a couple days a week, that's fantastic. That is still a pathway that you can pursue. If you're looking to, again, mix it up, or you have different models that you maybe need to consider, there are the other options that the team shared today. So again, we have that P2 high school calendar where it follows the same kind of flow, but we're really honing in on those P2 of a graduate attributes. If you're looking as a school as a whole, where P2 Portrait of a Graduate is really something that you are focusing on. And I know many schools are considering those elements. When you think about all of the research that is out there with so many businesses that are saying, hey, these soft skills are lacking. We need these durable skills in students that are graduating and entering the workforce. Then perhaps the P2 Portrait of a Graduate might be the lens that works best in the high school. You also then have the P2 Career Readiness Toolbox, which again, as the team mentioned, it could be a particular class. It might be an elective, a business class, home ec. There's a lot of different places where that might have a fit. There really is no right or wrong way. It's you being in the driver's seat. And that's been something that we really have strived to do here at P2, where you are the experts. You know your students best. You know your school culture. You know the needs. You have the data to support whatever decision it is that you are making. So just know there is no right or wrong path. It really is taking and thinking about your situation and what would work best. So again, just the reminder that that original pathway with the P2 calendar, with the Understand, Engage, Reflect is still available. That hasn't gone anywhere. Whoops, we don't need to open that up. Um, I wanted to just put a couple of different elements you might want to consider when you think about selecting your pathway. So focusing again that beginning with the end in mind goal. What is the graduation goal? What is it your district or your school is really trying to do when it comes to graduating seniors? Think about the district as a whole. You definitely want to make sure that what pathway you're choosing aligns with your district vision. So always important, as you're learning about these new resources, to consult your building leadership, to consult district leadership. These are really decisions that need to be made, kind of collaboratively. Again, as I mentioned before, the portrait of a graduate. Our team did an amazing job. We have partners all over the United States, many in California, New York, Michigan, North Carolina, and we really tried to look at all of the different portraits of a graduate for these different states and make sure that ours really kind of was a cumulative of these different states so that what you are hoping your graduates are able to achieve, P2's resources will support. A lot of these different resources, we've been talking to some schools, have a very strong place in CTE focus classes or different curriculums. So, another pathway where perhaps some of these resources might be able to be utilized. Number five on here, I think, is really important. You want to look at the foundation that P2 has throughout your district. If you are a full school P2 site where, students starting in pre-K or kindergarten are getting P2 all the way through to high school, those students really have the solid foundation of the strengths. So maybe moving it to the career readiness lens makes a little more sense. If you're a high school and students haven't had P2 throughout their tenure as a student within the district, then maybe there is a little bit more of the background knowledge that needs to be brought in. But again, I default to you are the experts and you know your school and your staff best. It really is important to kind of, again, look at these different elements, but at the end of the day, it is up to you to choose. And just know our Pre2 team is here. We love any feedback. We are happy to engage in conversation. On the next slide, I do include a little bit more background information. Staff who's on our call today published this an amazing blog post that really, in writing, breaks down everything you have heard today. So if you need a quick way to share this again with perhaps a district administrator, building principal, or things like that, this blog post does a nice job of breaking up, hey, here are the new resources, here are potential uses. So know that this is available as well. And then, as always, we are more than happy to connect. I have my email on the screen, especially for our existing partners. If you have heard something on the call today and you want to take it back to the team and then come to the table and sort of engage in thought partnership, what might work best, for our site? Here are our barriers. Here's successes that we've had. We're always happy to have those one-on-one conversations and really make sure that, each site has the P2 experience that works best for you. So know that you are supported throughout your whole journey. But we're very excited for these new high school resources. As always, again, appreciate the feedback and helping to propel our resources forward and making sure that what we are creating is meeting the needs of educators and students. And with that, I'm going to pause. If there are any questions, we will open up the forum to that now. And if not, down the road, again, you have my email. More than happy to answer one-on-one questions then.